This conference will now be recorded.
Oh, somebody else is recording it. Oh, I'm supposed to warn you. We're going to record this. Last time I pressed the button, but somebody got trigger happy and pressed before me. So, yeah, so today we have Michael Cade, doesn't need an introduction, has been here before, and we've got a lot of exciting things to talk about. So I guess first and foremost, there's a lot of, I don't know what's first, but there's KubeCon, but there's 90 days of DevOps, which of course been a huge hit. And I think maybe we start with that because it's just coming to a close now. And we can ask Michael about what plans he has for future and how he thought it went. I've gone through the YouTube videos. They are fantastic. If you want to bypass taking long courses and you don't have time for that, you can go through this 90 days of DevOps and get a very strong understanding of everything in Kubernetes. And then you can pick and choose any areas you want to dive deep into. So without further ado, welcome, Michael, and tell us about 90 days of DevOps.
Yeah, hey, Geoff. Yeah, so 90 Days of DevOps as a project was something that I started in 2022 at the beginning of the year, because everyone has their best ideas on New Year's Eve, right? Where I thought, well, from January the 1st to March the 31st, which is exactly 90 days, I've been parachuted into this role of looking after our product strategy, office of the CTO around our Kubernetes acquisition that we just made with Kasten, and then equally over that time got more responsibility about our cloud products as well. So, and before that even came about, I'd already done quite a bit of messing around with things like Linux and Terraform and Ansible and Chef and Puppet and some of the areas. And I used the analogy, Geoff, I think we might have done this last time, about a bit of Swiss cheese, but there's a lot of holes in Swiss cheese, right? So it was like, how do I plug those gaps? How do I understand it? Well, starting the 1st of January 2022 was, let's go through some of these areas. Let's spend 7 days on each one of these. Let's get a fundamental foundational knowledge of them and go through it. So that's what 2022 was and what it started. It ended up being 110,000 words. If I just go into this, hopefully you can see the screen. You can see it. And if you go into, so they're all split up into things like what is and why do we even use DevOps? Why is it a thing? Learning a programming language, knowing Linux basics. If we go and take a look at one of those, there's screenshots of an Ubuntu box. The most important part that I found and why people seem to come to this was it's a bit of structured learning. It allows people to jump into these modules, if you will, and everything's accessible. Nothing, I'm not using any proprietary paid for software. Like even, so I'm using VirtualBox to run my local virtual machines. I'm using Golang as my programming language, or Python as another option. And I'm using Linux, which is anyone can get hold of that, right? Same for a lot of the other pieces. So that's how it really started, and that was 2022. Fast forward to 2023, and instead of me doing all the work and you only hearing my perspective, the focus was around security and some friends from the community that have that subject matter expertise. And again, you see the modules. So if you wanted to go into security around continuous delivery and deployment, you could jump into here. You could read up on what that is, and then there's some resources on some of the bottoms of these like these days, these modules. You see again some screenshots of how do we get started, what do we do, and then now we're here 2024, and this is as far as I've got. But if you come to the repo, we just finished on day 91. So this year being a leap year, Geoff will love this, is that we obviously had to do 91 days of DevOps. So what happened here was, and you can kind of take this first one as a bit of an introduction. What is, and it kind of goes into a bit more detail about why I started it, what it was used for, and all of that good stuff, and then take 90 sessions that are appropriately aimed at learning stuff about DevOps and platform engineering and SRE and all of the weird and wonderful buzz terms for the different roles that ultimately are all the same anyway. And you'll see here that we've got 91 sessions listed out. And at the moment, if you click onto most of these, they won't have anything in that .md because we changed the format to be more akin to video format. So over here, you'll see that each one of those day ones through to day 91 are all on this playlist, and you can flick through them. In fact, let's find. So obviously this is a lot of friends within the community as well. And if we go and look at day 10, which I tried to make every day, or every 10th day was like a keynote for me. Let's get a really renowned speaker to come and do that session. So, in fact, Geoff, I should have picked your one. I'll get to that one next.
You said renowned. We got
Yeah, there you go. No, you're very renowned, mate. So Julia, who's also on our team, she did a session. She's done a fantastic circuit of this session actually around. I first saw it at Civo Navigate. Where were we? In fact, Geoff, you didn't come to that.
Tampa.
But it was in Tampa. It was.
I wasn't there, but yeah, I remember Tampa. Yeah.
And she did this session there. So I really wanted that session. But the premise of 90 Days of DevOps 2024 edition was about the community. Anyone can write down a load of stuff about a load of different topics, and that was great, and that worked for 2022, and it kind of worked for 2023. But 2024, we had to branch out. We couldn't just do the same again, because as much as technology is really, really fast and changing quite a bit, those topics are those topics. They don't really change too much. Like that, learning a programming language and I chose Golang, that in 2023 was Python. The fundamentals are still the same. The fundamentals haven't changed. So these sessions are there to, one, I've got an addiction to YouTube that I'm not really speaking to anyone about yet, Geoff. I probably should. But I literally watch YouTube on repeat every single evening, every single night, and that's me switching off from the day job. So to find that playlist, you just need to come into if you go to 90daysofdevops.com, we're working on this as well to make this a little bit more usable. But you'll see, so at the moment we've got 2022 and 2023. If you go down here, you'll see that the star history, and these are a bit of a vanity metric, but they show that people are looking at this stuff, right? And it's growing. You can see the dips in between, but ultimately people are using this, and I think the people that are using it because it provides some sort of structure to how to navigate that path, that learning curve of DevOps. And in there, you've got Kubernetes, you've got cloud, you've got containerization, you've got everything around that, even Linux, networking, databases, etc. But if you come into here, if you go to 90daysofdevops.com, you hit that top right-hand corner, you'll go to the repo. That repo takes you to this page, and hopefully, I'm not going to put any more deadlines on me, but hopefully soon, we will have each one of these pages will have at least a top level link to that thumbnail and to that video. And then even more of a stretch goal would be, how do we maybe provide a blog post for each of the days. I think if we go into this one, this is a great example, right? So I kind of want this thumbnail, then it's got a bit about the speaker, it's got a bit about what is DevOps from their perspective, what are the challenges, how can we scale. It's very akin to the session that they deliver, Romano delivers, but you can see it's a little bit more. If you want to go and find out more, land on this page. So that's a long-winded way of saying that's what I've been up to so far this year, Geoff, with this little side project. And the most important thing is that there's no hidden Veeam like adverts all the way through this. It's Veeam have given me the opportunity to be able to do this, go and learn in public. It's kind of what I've always done since being at Veeam. They're happy for us to educate and try and help the community when it comes to all things technology.
Yeah, and what struck me was that nothing like this existed. And so when I first started to do Kubernetes, I compared it to like those Greek mosaics on the wall. You know, when you look from afar, it's a bit terrifying because there's bits and pieces all over and you don't know where to start, what to do. And you have to go up close and go step by step. But there was something lacking. And someone actually, wasn't my idea. Someone said to me when they looked at this, they said, you know what? It's almost as if Michael came in with a different perspective because he wasn't in the DevOps world before, and then used his experience and his learning experience and just combine that. And that's really what DevOps are, devs and operations. It's the whole idea of combining to get stronger, and made this, which just wasn't there. And so people, you know, there are a lot of courses out there, a lot of free courses, but they're big, they're heavy, they're time consuming. This was the absolute perfect answer. If you need to go through it to get a general idea and then find out what you're really interested in, this gives you that opportunity. And then the fact that you expanded it slowly too. I don't know if you planned that from the beginning or not, but you know, brought community in later. It was just an absolutely great recipe for success because, okay, it was interesting at first, really interesting, but then you get people involved as well. So yeah, I mean, I kind of thought that you sat there using the Veeam, you know, method, but maybe you just thought this up yourself.
No. So honestly, that first 2022 edition was me thinking about that on New Year's Eve. How can I throw myself out into this community and provide some sort of accountability for myself? Well, I do that pretty well. If I tweet, this is what I'm going to do, well, then I'm held accountable. Even if it's only me looking at that tweet, I know that if I'd have only got to day 56 of 90 and given up, then I would have failed my own accountability, right? And I had no idea. I think we spoke at the end of that one, Geoff, and as we were planning on what 2023 was going to be, I kind of started that year was, well, there was no security. I didn't mention anything security. So it kind of wrote itself. And seeing what, like, obviously when I first started on January the 1st, 2022, no one even knew what the hell I was doing, apart from a couple of people on Twitter. Day 10, I remember speaking to Vanover. I remember speaking to the Rickatron and saying, look, this is what I'm doing. And I think I got maybe day 10, maybe day 20. He goes, yeah, I'm going to bookmark it. I'll come back to that when you finished it. So it's like, right, there's some more accountability, because at the time I was reporting to Rick as well still. So now my boss he's not even reading it, but he's going to read it when I finish. So I've got to finish. And then once we finished, there was some discussions on there around maybe you can go this way, maybe a different perspective. So that's how we got to 2023. Similar to that is that, okay, not everyone, and I've changed as well, right? Before the pandemic, I was all about reading blogs. My whole Monday morning would be, well, actually the weekend, I'm sad like that as well, but I would be reading blogs, reading documentation and understanding how something works. But over the pandemic, I kind of got into more YouTube, more video, more free content, more training content that was visual. My brain seems to get it, right, as well. And a lot of the resources that I use in the bottom of each of the days link back to free YouTube content from things like Tech World with Nana, from DevOps Toolkit from Victor. There's a few others in there as well, like Cube Simplify and others. So I decided that the 2024 edition, we should change the format, the media, and we should start looking at video content. And what better way to do that in a world where everyone's not getting their sessions submitted and accepted into these big conferences that have a less than 20% chance of getting submitted. Okay, well, let's put them in one place and see how they go. So on that as well, so everyone that submitted a session, they were all accepted. I did not deny anyone. We have a list of 10 people that also accepted that just didn't deliver, but we don't need to give them any air of time. But it's also like, if you think about, we've got 91 sessions here.
That's incredible. Yeah.
That only have 10 to 15 people drop off that. It's understandable. So yeah, that's the bit behind that, Geoff.
And it's interesting too, because You know, you mentioned the pandemic, and everyone thinks back and it's all negative, but there are really some interesting good things that came out of that. And I think one of the things here is kind of retrospective, looking into yourself, what works and what doesn't. And the whole movement towards video, because people were stuck at home. Think about it. We have to read, obviously. Documentation is going nowhere. But when you have hours and hours and hours, there's almost so much reading you can do when you just want to sit back and watch the video. And then people start to say, wait a minute, I'm remembering this stuff, you know. So, you know, it's incredible how this actually evolved with the pandemic. One question, did you think it would be as successful as it was? I mean, did you have any inclination?
No, not at all. It was never the plan either. Like, the whole plan for this was actually to just write down my notes. And in fact, I probably shouldn't do this. Like, going back to, if we think about like day one. So day one of our 90 days, like I've put it like there's spelling mistakes and all sorts in here, but this was me writing a blog every single day just to help me grasp what is DevOps. Because if you go to a company or a customer, if you go to company A and they've got a group of DevOps engineers, and you go to company B and they've got another group of DevOps engineers, and then maybe company C have some cloud engineers or some sysadmins or some SREs, none of them roles are going to be the same. Even company A to company B, even though their people are called DevOps engineers, that could mean so many different things. You could still be a DevOps engineer. In fact, I hate the term DevOps engineer. Hear me out on this, because DevOps is a principle and a process. I actually would say DevOps is a similar way to thinking when you think about things like ITIL. It's a principle, it's a process, it's a change management process that we put in place so that we go from A to B, and we go from A to B, and we're not only quick and efficient from that, but we're also secure. We're all of that good stuff. So to call anyone a DevOps engineer, and don't get me wrong, I have no issue with anyone being called a DevOps engineer. In fact, fair play, because it probably means you got a pay rise. Well done. And I'm all for that. But a DevOps engineer is different depending on where you are and what you're doing and all of that. But a DevOps engineer playing with infrastructure as code and deploying their infrastructure is a DevOps engineer. A DevOps engineer working with CI/CD pipelines and delivering and helping software development companies actually deliver software is still a DevOps engineer. And I guess that's quite an interesting topic that I've been speaking about over the last few years, really, is that the evolution of the sysadmin. Like when we just had sysadmins, Geoff, it was a lot easier, right? Everyone was a sysadmin. So it was a lot easier to define, what do? Oh, you're a sysadmin. Oh, cool. So you look after stuff and make sure the lights are on. Well, the lights are on and the lights are green. That's your job. And I think that's the evolution of a sysadmin, is to constantly think about that principle and the process around DevOps and that automation. How do I automate something that is laborious, that takes time, and it's repeatable?
Yeah, and the funny thing is too, when I was just thinking about what you were saying and about the success of this, it kind of reminds me of Kubernetes, because basically what happened, you had a big company like Google, and they had this thing, and there was a decision. Are we going to like market this and push it out, or are we going to let it go on its own and see what happens? And we saw what happened. And this here, I mean, you read this and you never see the word really Veeam once, unless if you look at your title. But what I think happens is people look at this, look at the quality of it. They get so much out of it, and then they look at the Veeam, and then they, in their heads, they associate quality with that. So it's a very smart way of doing things, I think. And again, about system admins, yeah, I mean, I've had so many job titles, and you know what? I don't think I've ever had a job title that's really defined what I do, partially because our jobs, at least in IT, I think, are always changing. And so, you know, what you thought you were a year later, you're not. And so, yeah, so this has been an excellent effort. And I just know so many people who have honestly said, this helped me a lot because I was lost. And maybe they didn't go forward in Kubernetes, or maybe they did, but they have a much better understanding about it. So is there anything else you want to say about the 90 days of DevOps, or if we move on to another exciting topic?
So my biggest ask from the community is what are we missing? Like what else should be on there? And I'm also thinking about, like, so we've now done a lot of writing, we've done the video format. Should that be it? Should we stop there? Should we do something similar next year and probably get some more people involved rather than just me having to herd everything? But yeah, what are we missing? That's always the feedback is like, I know that there's been no coverage of virtualization or much coverage of virtualization in here.
I mean, something like KubeVirt or something like that. Yeah. Something like KubeVirt, you think is possibility, or?
So potentially, but even like that, another interesting topic, and we're probably creeping into another session somewhere along the Veeam webinar line, is like, no, VMware is not the answer to everything. It maybe was or seemed to be, but now we're seeing other hypervisors out there trying to take over, trying to help with that migration path. Like, should we be looking into that? Does that roll under the DevOps like umbrella? Should we do something around SREs and platform engineering? Is that clear to everyone? Or like, because I think also people see 2022 and they go, oh, that's 2 years old. Like that's that must be out of date.
Which isn't true. I mean, it's still very actual. I went through it the other day, and I'm actually planning on going through again because, you know, if you don't do something in one area, you forget. Oh, and did you see that today Veeam announced they're supporting another hypervisor? Oracle Linux KVM just officially got supported. So there we go.
Yeah, and that goes to my point, right, about like what is that? Why should you care as we go through this next drama phase of IT industry, of what VMware and Broadcom are up to, and then what are the options? Like, it always used to be, in my opinion, coming from that space, it was VMware, it was Hyper-V, and it then was Nutanix HV, and then you got the cloud options. That was it. That was all I really knew about. Then KVM, more KVM-based hypervisors are well and truly out there. You've got the likes of Scale Computing, you've got Verge.io, you've got Oracle Linux KVM, you've got Proxmox. Like, you've got KubeVirt that you mentioned, you've got OpenShift virtualization, you've got Red Hat virtualization, you've got so many options. So I think that's an interesting topic that maybe could come around as well. Then the other thought was around, like, do we do a spotlight session every month, which is a bit like a podcast? Do we already have too many podcasts? But thinking about what that session could be is a bit more of a show and tell. So I'll get Geoff on. Geoff can learn something in a day because that's what he does, and then come and present on that, and actually show us what that is, versus it just being a communication like this. So we're actually running through some demos of what he's learning.
Yeah, that's a good idea too, because one thing I've when talking to people is there are people who learn much better from written script. That's, you know, that's the case. But certainly seeing it and being told in a video is helpful, especially when there are little nuances. Like I came upon one the other day, I can't remember what it was, with Proxmox, and it was one little nuance, and it's in the documentation, but you know, it's on page 500. And I mean, if you learn things in a day, you don't read 500 pages. Yeah, so that certainly helps. But anyway, so that's great. Well, I think this effort's going to be, I can see it being continued because it's so popular. Why don't we move on to another exciting topic, which is KubeCon. You were at KubeCon this year in Paris. So KubeCon Europe just goes into all these, I mean, KubeCon USA was in Detroit, which actually was probably pretty interesting. I didn't get there, but in Europe, it's like Paris, and I don't know what's going to next time. So tell us about that. What stuck out the best for you there, apart from the French wine, of course, and what was exciting? And also, on the end of that question, what have you seen change in KubeCon? Because I've been hearing that, people saying, and some people, by the way, not so positively, that's lost its kind of, you know, I would say, you know, nerdy intellectual thing. So I just don't know if that's the case or not.
I think that's an interesting point. And yeah, we always get the glamorous locations over in Europe, but I think that's because we have so many different cultures as well. Yeah. I think my biggest takeaway is, like, there's still a huge percentage of new and first time people attending KubeCon. And then think about what that looks like, whether it's do developers even need to be at KubeCon anymore, which is probably what it was, and or are we seeing more of the SRE, the more of the sysadmin type position now rocking up? And I think we are, because this was the first event that we didn't display or sponsor as Kasten. We sponsored as Veeam. And
okay.
I had a lot of conversations about people coming up to us about, oh, I didn't know Veeam was here, even though it was Kasten by Veeam. Veeam is a much more well-known brand in that platform engineering, systems administrator, backup admin type space. So we then got that conversation. I think it helps overall to help build that brand up in that space. I think overall, if you look at the show floor was mega busy. I think it's interesting, always interesting from a CNCF point of view. So it's KubeCon, but it's also Cloud Native Con. So it doesn't all just focus on Kubernetes. Kubernetes is one of those projects. Yes, it's probably the biggest, but it all doesn't gravitate around that. You've got Prometheus, you've got serverless functions, you've got cloud-based workloads, and a lot more of the in-between stuff as well. I think there was a big flavor of AI, as there is in every single conference that I seem to have been to. In fact, some of my key takeaways, and hopefully you can see the slide. So I did a 4-minute YouTube, very quick, show up and throw up type, my take on this. But exciting projects that I'd probably go back, or I am definitely going to go back and spend some time on, one is Ollama. So if you've not heard of Ollama, it's the ability to bring an LLM to your local machine. It's if you know the concept of Docker and Docker Hub and Docker images, obviously you can go, Geoff, you can go and pull down a Docker image. It could be a Redis image, and now you've got Docker running. You've got Redis now running on your machine in a self-isolated container, and you can start throwing data around that instance. So Ollama is very similar in that it actually pulls down LLMs like that. So they're a bit bigger than a container image, but you basically say pull and it pulls down that LLM. Now take that concept, now put it into Kubernetes and make it multiple nodes that potentially have GPUs, and now we can start to train our own so we think about Ollama and then baseline LLMs as somewhere to bring it down, and then we start building on top of that with our own data, and you start building your own LLM at that point. So this was about running Ollama on your Kubernetes cluster, and they have a Helm chart, super interesting. I can only expect that I'll see a Geoff post on Kubernetes Korner.
So maybe also define for people who hear LLM, because I'm thinking there might be people who don't know what that is.
All right, so large language models. So when we think about ChatGPT, you might see, so ChatGPT has its own LLM, large language model. You might see other things like, what's another one? Like Mistral. You might see the Google one. Is it called Genesis?
Yeah, I think Genesis.
Yeah, there you go. If we both said it, Geoff, that means it's probably right. So this is about bringing it local to you, so you're not consuming it out there on the web. But so that was one, or an exciting project to explore at least. The other was not necessarily a project, but I think one of the big questions that I saw being asked was, do we build or buy? Because when it comes to Kubernetes, I'm not going to say it's easy. It's easy for you to go and put the scaffolding and build your own house. You could go and run your own bare metal hosts. You could go and run just upstream Kubernetes, vanilla Kubernetes, and you could then go and add on all of the CNCF landscape that makes sense, like the vending machine that it is, pick and choose, all of that good stuff. Great for learning. I probably wouldn't do that if I was in charge. I would probably go and pick an off-the-shelf distribution such as EKS, AKS, GKE, OpenShift anywhere, and I would use that. So this session that's linked here is basically a panel session that touches on all of those areas, and you've got some end users in there that have done this, whether they're building their own or whether they're buying basically. But obviously with that is, do you have the money to spend or not? Like, and that in between. So there might be a bit of both. And then the final thing to go and look at, and I've looked at this a little bit, is the backstack. I don't know if you've ever heard of this, Geoff, but basically the backstack consists of Backstage, which is an internal development platform. Again, gives you a front end to go and be able to do something. This is my desired state. Show me what that is. Give me that out in my Kubernetes cluster or clusters. You've got Argo CD, which provides that Argo or that GitOps methodology. And then you've got Crossplane, which is your infrastructure as code that enables that desired state. And then Kyverno, which is a policy guardrail or a policy engine, enforcement engine that enables you to define the swim lanes that you want your devs or your users to adhere to. Now, I've played around with Argo CD. I've done a session around integrating backup into that CI/CD pipeline or GitOps pipeline. I've also played with Kyverno. We have an integration with Kyverno that basically says if you run any stateful workload or any workload in the Kubernetes cluster, it needs to have a K10 backup. So we work quite closely with that. But I haven't touched Backstage and I haven't touched Crossplane. So that's kind of on my to-do list amongst the other 1,000 things. But these are the three big things that I took away, is that, okay, how could I as a technologist be more informed about what the world is doing in the Kubernetes world, in the cloud native landscape? And these are the three things that I take. And I generally put something like this together after every big event. What's the big takeaway? Where do I go? The second bit is, I can't believe that Kubernetes is 10 years old and we're just talking about 1.30. Maybe that's another session or another blog at least, Geoff, to touch on. There's some interesting stuff coming with 1.30. But it wasn't just about AI either. I know I've just touched about a little bit of that. There was a lot of that. I felt like there was a lot of AI washing in the keynotes. Everything had to have some sort of AI-ness. Which is just not reality.
It's the sexy term.
Exactly that. There was a bit about sustainability as well, and that got me thinking about, okay, so when we were in Chicago last year for KubeCon, there was a massive focus around WASM, which is WebAssembly running on the server or on the client. And when you think about sustainability, by being able to put the compute on the laptop or on the end user device, it hopefully reduces the impact on the server. And then that got me thinking about things like databases, right? How many replicas are too many, or do I actually need, right? So I can have a replica of my database in everywhere, all regions, across all clouds, and that would be great. It'd be very resilient to that, very highly available. But how many do I actually need? Like, what nines are we trying to achieve here? Also, then we store a lot of backups into storage buckets, object storage. This is not just from a custom point of view, but from a Veeam perspective. What's the life cycle management on that? Because as humans, we love to hoard and keep everything. So do we have a life cycle management
closet,
policy? Yeah, exactly. Not that I've seen your closet, Geoff.
It's jammed.
And they made a big point around, so sustainability is still a thing, and that's something that I'm quite conscious of when we think about Veeam in our software defined world as well. Is okay, because we can back up everything. Veeam's pretty good, right? We'll back up everything and everywhere, and we can send it to wherever you want. And we don't put any guardrails on that. You literally could set all of your backups to stay around for a very, very long time. Now, what we should be doing is better enabling you to define some of that longer term life cycle management. The other thing that's interesting, and maybe again there's a post on this, is I mentioned about GPUs on Kubernetes nodes. Obviously, you've been able to do that for a while. You've been able to run GPUs on vSphere hosts as well. But Kubernetes are bringing something, or they've brought something called dynamic resource allocation, DRA, something well worth looking into if you're in that LLM, that AI type machine learning phase. Yeah, Kubernetes turning 10, largest KubeCon ever, 12,000 people rocked up to Paris.
So it's growing, still growing.
So, yeah, and we're starting to see very much those numbers coming back after the pandemic as well. I don't have that detail, but obviously for the pandemic, it was right down, or it was massive because it was all virtual, which is very easy for everyone to log in then. But since being back in person, we're now getting back to the numbers that it was back in 2019. Also, the CNCF graduated projects. In fact, let me see if I can click this. Lot of hype around Cilium. So Cilium is a cloud native, or a container network interface, a CNI. Lots of good stuff in there. They've actually, the company behind them, which is Isovalent, has just been picked up by Cisco. I think that's another thing that we're going to see as well, is a consolidation of a lot of these small first startup project type stuff. You got cloud events, Envoy, Falco, and the thing that I also have enjoyed doing over the time of looking into the CNCF and into cloud native is understanding what companies are behind what. And then when you start to do that CNCF landscape shrinks down a little bit, right? So you got Cilium, which was Isovalent, being picked up by Cisco. Yeah. You've got Falco. Falco's a project, more of a security focused project that is mostly governed and maintained by Sysdig. There's a lot of AWS in there as well, but mostly that. You've got Flux. Actually, if you go back and look at Flux was really created by the founders of Weaveworks. Weaveworks, unfortunately, a couple of months ago went by the wayside, but in a very open way. I thought the way in which they handled it was very good, but Flux was their CI/CD pool, or their CD tool, similar to Argo. Harbor, I believe, came from VMware with the Hectio acquisition, which is a container image or a container registry. So if you don't want to use the Docker Hub to pull down your images, you can use one locally. And there's a load in there, right? There's loads. But this I always like reading this sort of blog after KubeCon or around KubeCon, because it gives you an idea of it's literally just the graduated projects. And if you think about what that order looks like, you've got graduated, which is where Kubernetes and Prometheus and the big names are. Then you've got incubated, so they're on a journey to get to that place. And then you've got sandbox. Sandbox is where donated, very new, sometimes very niche projects go and live on the CNCF. So from our point of view, we've just donated, or at the last KubeCon, we donated Canister. Canister is now a CNCF sandbox project that we had a spot at the project pavilion in Paris as well, which was great to see.
And also keep in mind, I think people maybe are thinking VM terms of, well, beta, but it's not. A lot of these projects are actually being used in production before they graduate.
Yeah, exactly that. I think it's very interesting, actually. It goes back to that vending machine, and I'm coining a term that Engin from Pulumi mentioned in one of his sessions a couple of weeks ago, is he called it the CNCF vending machine, because there's like when you go to a vending machine the world over, you've always got a couple of different chocolate bars and a couple of different crisps or chips, depending on where you are in the world. And you choose the flavor, but they do the same thing. And that's why he called it a vending machine, because the CNCF landscape, a lot of the things they overlap, they do a lot of the similar things. You couldn't install everything in one cluster. There's a challenge for you, Geoff.
Yeah. I lose all my hair.
I'm not sure what time it is. I know I've been rambling on for a lot, but another thing that I was incredibly amazed, because obviously I hadn't had enough during the day, when I got back to my hotel room, I went onto YouTube because, like I say, I've got an addiction, and already the co-located events and then ongoing Cloud Rejects and CNCF and KubeCon, their sessions were then being uploaded as well. So if you had 2 sessions that you didn't get to go to because you were otherwise on another session, you know that it's going to be uploaded in 5-6 hours for you to go and watch.
Excellent.
It's incredible.
You could continue the conversation the next day, kind of thing, fresh.
Yeah, so at least it's topical. It's there in your mind. So Geoff, if you obviously weren't in Paris drinking champagne, but we have 331 videos to get through. Now the beauty of that is that we can turn on 1.5 times, and you can get through them in
speed it up.
in a
That's my
time.
secret. But it affects your brain too, and I think too quickly now, which gets me in trouble.
Yeah, or too many ideas as well. I watch too many videos, I get too many ideas, I get stressed. Yeah, and it's a DevOps loop.
Yeah,
just a continuous loop. Another one that I would, if you don't watch any of them, but you want to watch something from there, is I would encourage everyone to go and look at Cloud Rejects. Cloud Native Rejects it started on the Sunday, it was on the Monday as well. So it's well before the conference that started on Wednesday to Friday. And then on Tuesday, you have co-located events. Cloud Native Rejects is a great community effort where if your session didn't get accepted into KubeCon, which only 12% of the submissions do, maybe 13% this year, then you just take them and you can offload them to Cloud Native Rejects. Hopefully you'll get a chance there. I was lucky to be accepted in there. So myself and Anais works for Aqua Security, we did a session called The Bang, when bad things happen to your data. And basically we were talking about the software development lifecycle, so one side of that, and then we're talking about the operation side. That's great from a software point of view. We want to release, like Veeam, I want to release good, secure, solid applications. So we run through our own security testing, same as like Veeam Kasten as well. But then when the customer actually deploys that software, obviously it still needs to be secure, but now it's on the customer's head. The customer now needs to make sure that they're protecting their workloads, protecting their data, and all of that good stuff. So basically that session talks about the left and right of Bang, the Bang being the bad thing. You've probably heard me say something along them lines before. But I would encourage, you don't have to watch my session, but any of that Cloud Native Rejects are really just solid community sessions. There is no vendor pitch whatsoever. It's really, really good. The other one to mention is the Kubernetes Data Protection Working Group. So CNCF have the special interest groups, they have storage special interest groups, and then within that, they have other working groups. Data protection is one of them. We are obviously heavily present when it comes to that. And Zing, who she looks after she runs it. I think she's the chair of that working group. But our own Dave Uchida Smith, he also presented with us, so it's well worth just to see what the community is saying. Like it's not a custom pitch at all. We're thinking about how we can implement change block tracking for the whole of Kubernetes. Wow. Obviously, we'll take advantage of that, but then so can everyone else. Yeah. The whole point about the community is about how do we push things forward and raise awareness of what we can do to be safe and secure when it comes to data on Kubernetes. I think that's it, mate. That's me.
Well, that's fantastic. And I didn't know about that deep dive group, and that's really interesting. So are you seeing now more of an understanding and more of a concern about data protection? Because I remember when I first went to KubeCon in 2021, data protection and some developers, I just have my little script and that does it. Don't. But I slowly saw a change. The more bad things happen, the more people start to get a little bit more humble about their little scripts.
Yeah, I think there's 2 bits to that. One is you see the public cloud hyperscalers bringing out some sort of very minimal viable product that will allow you to protect these PVCs, persistent volume claims, within your Kubernetes cluster, which is testament to what we're doing, right? Is that it just shows that there is a requirement. but then equally seeing more and more stateful workloads popping up in the Kubernetes space. I think that's another interesting thing. That you've mentioned KubeVirt already. That's a virtual machine running in Kubernetes. That is a fully stateful workload. Like the VMDK that runs the operating system, which also runs the application, that's stateful. You don't want that to be rebooted and then go back to zero. You're going to want that to stay persistent as you reboot that system. And then that means that we've got to protect that. Now, we already protect KubeVirt virtual machines running on OpenShift virtualization. We're also working with SUSE around Harvester. And generally speaking, if you've got a use case for that, we can talk about KubeVirt protection. But the interesting thing is well, around operators as well. If you look at the CMPG operator, the cloud native Postgres operator, a CNCF project in the cloud native databases, we're seeing an uplift of people wanting to run that. Now, when I first started, we were just using stateful sets, even deployments with PVCs. Operators enable us to get that desired state for that database, which becomes very interested in then obviously needing to protect those workloads.
So we've got like 9 minutes left. So it's always the fun question. What are your plans for the future? What are any interesting stuff happening with Kasten or any surprises? That 9 minutes might not be enough for that, but it also won't let you release any secrets by accident.
So from a Kasten point of view, one thing, because KubeCon was early this year, normally we go from KubeCon EU to KubeCon NA. If you think about KubeCon EU would be our .0 release. And that's generally, let me explain that for 3.5 of those minutes, maybe. Those big 7.0 or 7.5 releases are just a culmination of what's come over the last 6 months. So they're always, it's a marketing release is probably the easiest way to define it. But everything that we talk about in that release is already on the truck. Like we're not talking about the next 6 months. We never divulge what 7.5 is going to have, right? The future release. So you can be sure that if you go and look at docs.kasten.io and you go down the bottom to release notes, and you'll see 6.5.1, 6.5.10, all the way through, there'll be new features in there, and you can go, oh, Azure Immutability, I can give this away because it's already there. I didn't tell anyone this because it's already there. It's like people can go and read that. We support Azure Immutability from a K10 perspective. But when we get round to 7.0, which is being released later on the May timeframe, so at the beginning of May, we have Red Hat Summit, which is going to be in Denver, Colorado, which kind of just works out that May timeframe, which is when we normally see KubeCon. And then when we get round to Salt Lake City for KubeCon North America, we'll have 7.5. I actually have an engineering offsite to go and discuss all of the exciting new things that we load into that truck as well. But I just wanted to clear that up as well. I got many questions the other week about, oh, so what's the big release here? And actually, no, we didn't. It's only March. It was mid-March. We don't want to get in the way. Engineering is still beavering away on them 2-week release cycles, and they'll keep beavering away until we get to May. We'll release that final 7.0, and then we'll start developing what that 7.5 payload looks like as well.
That's good, yeah, because it's difficult to understand sometimes the release. It is so different from virtualization software releases, you know, the whole Kubernetes thing. So
yeah, and I'm hoping that obviously a lot of those characteristics around software releases can both engineering teams from a Veeam perspective can help and leverage each other from that perspective as well.
So I was going to say your plans in the sense that I think Michael showed on the Slack the other day, the Vanguards, his calendar, and literally he's hopscotching across the world. Like, I don't know, I've been traveling a bit more recently myself. I think the only thing that you can do is you get good at the little tricks, like you know which line to get in, you know how much to pack. But if you don't travel that often, you think, how does he do it? So what are your plans apart from the everyday traveling kind of thing?
So plan wise, basically my next trip is a product strategy group meeting in Seattle. So if you saw that HQ now for Veeam is in Seattle, and then I'm home for a week, I think, and then it's Red Hat Summit in Denver.
Wow.
Then I have to take a note of them because I have to tell my wife when I'm not going to be at home. So I'll just use that right now.
Yeah.
Then we have the Custom Engineering Offsite, which is going to be in San Jose. I'm then going to be in New York for the Kubernetes Community Days event on the 22nd of May. Then I'm home, and then I'm off to Miami or Fort Lauderdale for Veeam. And then actually I have a full stop after Veeam for 6 weeks of no travel. So I can, if you think about that list of Seattle, Denver, San Francisco or San Jose, New York, Miami, then it's home for 6 weeks. So I can put the grind in there to have that 6 weeks off. And that basically, I've got a personal old rugby injury that needs to be fixed over here.
Oh no. So. Are you able to work on planes? Because I've been trying to do that, and it's like I actually had a perfect setup once, and I got a neighbor who wanted to have a conversation. And as much as I hinted, I said, well, I'm kind of busy. I've got a deadline. Well, that's wonderful. What do you do? It's like, I do busy now. It didn't work.
So I never scheduled time to have done on a plane, but actually I can be the most productive me on a plane as well, because if you take away that, the internet's it's never going to be good, and that's a first world problem anyway. But I also write some blog posts on there sometimes. You get some good ideas. YouTube, if you get YouTube Premium, you can download a load of stuff. And in my eyes, just being able to like clue up on maybe where you're going from a Red Hat point of view, like I'm going to go to Red Hat Summit, and yes, there's going to be a lot of my. If I look at the schedule, it's going to be all right. Let's navigate to Ansible and let's navigate to OpenShift. But actually, Red Hat is a huge company now. They have so much. They have Red Hat Enterprise Linux. They have everything. Like there is so much going on over there. So again, just give me the Red Hat 30-minute overview type thing. So I'd never, because that does happen quite a bit, Geoff. I never scheduled anything that I have to get done.
Right. Time. It's just too difficult. Yeah. Well, that's interesting, and it makes sense that if your travel schedule is that much, because otherwise it's just wasted time. I mean, I found myself looking at movies, and then you think, well, wait, you could be doing something productive, Geoff. So I think you've gotten to the stage where you discipline. And actually, it's not surprising, because the one thing going back to 90 days of DevOps, and I think this is good advice to everybody, discipline is key, because 90 days of DevOps, a brilliant idea, really well executed. But what really was the key, I think Michael said himself, it was the discipline. And one thing I learned running marathons when I used to was to always announce it to everybody, because then you're shamed into failing. I mean, not failing, but even trying. So, but that's key, is discipline. And so I think going back to Kubernetes is, no matter what a topic seems to be like, difficult, impossible, that's a conception in your mind. If you do step by step, 90 days, one after another, consistency and discipline, you can overcome it. I mean, at the end of your 3 years of 90 days of DevOps, you're probably a much more complete Kubernetes person you were at the beginning, obviously.
Oh, 100%. And the biggest thing there is you can read something all day, every day. You can watch some videos. But the best way that I found, and I think we differ a little bit here, Geoff, I know you've played with Minikube quite a bit, but Minikube for me was the best way to become I feel like there's two parts, and maybe there's another session in this as well, in that, where do I get started? And I use the analogy about a car mechanic. So a car mechanic needs to know what the engine looks like. But as a driver, I don't need to know about that engine. But Minikube enables me to just drive the car. I just want to run some applications. I don't need to know about the engine. But then if you want to go and learn about the engine, well, you can go and find resources about that as well. But if I just want to learn how to run applications on top, then I just need to look after. I need a simple Kubernetes cluster. That could be Kind, Kubernetes in Docker, it could be Minikube. I mean, you've done endless posts, it feels like, Geoff, on various Docker, Kubernetes, blah, blah, blah. Like, there's so many.
That's one of the most exciting things I think that you touched upon is it's so much easier to do in the Kubernetes world because the virtualization world, and I've been playing with Nutanix recently and I love it, but the problem is on my little home lab, I mean, it's like you're putting an elephant on top of a small car. It's like, it goes, but it kind of hovers. Whereas Kubernetes, you're right, you get in the Minikube or something and you're doing things with, my goodness, it's like real production because it is. But anyways, it looks like we hit the hour. We could go on all day. But that was fantastic. I just love the way these sessions just flow and just bring more questions. So thank you very much, Michael. We continue this future, and I hope we'll see more 90 days or something similar, maybe some new interesting ideas, because most importantly of all this is the help that you've given to people who are learning this. People thought maybe it was impossible, and they looked at this, and now they're much more confident. So thank you very much, and thanks to everybody, and we'll see you all next time on the Cube Corner Show.
Awesome.